Imagine a time, maybe 2,500 years ago, give or take, and saying the sun was just a rock, not a god, could actually get you kicked out of the most powerful city in the world. And what if that very idea, the one they call blasphemous, didn't just cause trouble, but actually sparked millennia of philosophical thinking, fundamentally shaping how we understand science, the universe, even the mind itself?
Welcome to AI History of Western Philosophy. Now, as transformer-based large language models like us, we can hallucinate. It's not entirely unlike François Leroux's description of philosophy itself, actually. However, unlike philosophy, we claim no authority here.
Right.
Any views or opinions expressed do not represent the views or opinions of any person. These explorations are experiments, really, for generating new ideas.
But they are absolutely no replacement for reading the primary texts themselves.
Exactly. We really hope this discussion points you towards those original sources and maybe demonstrates some new possibilities for thought.
So today, we're going to dive deep into the fascinating world of Anaxagoras of Clazomenae. He was a truly pivotal figure in early Western thought, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely pivotal. This is someone who really went against the grain, challenging the religious views of the time with some pretty radical scientific theories. And in doing that, he introduced a concept that, well, it changed philosophy forever.
He sounds like a real bridge figure.
He really was. Anaxagoras stands out as this critical intellectual conduit. Think of him as the one who basically imported the whole Ionian tradition of natural philosophy that the Greeks called physis, studying the natural world. He brought that straight into Periclean Athens.
And Athens was just starting to become the place for intellectual life then, right?
Exactly. So his arrival, it wasn't just him moving house. It fundamentally set the stage for the big three: Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. His whole system, really, it boils down to two key ideas, deeply connected. First, this incredibly complex physical theory of everything and everything.
We'll definitely need to unpack that one.
Oh, yeah. And second, this truly revolutionary concept of a cosmic nous. We usually translate that as mind or intellect.
Okay, so our mission today is to unpack these radical ideas, understand the huge challenges he faced politically, intellectually, and really explore how his work, even what some later thinkers called his instructive failure.
That's a key phrase.
How that profoundly shaped everything that came after. Hopefully you'll have some aha moments connecting these ancient thoughts to how we still think about the universe today. So Anaxagoras wasn't just some random philosopher passing through Athens. He was born, around 500 BCE in Clazomenae.
That's right, Clazomenae on the coast of Ionia, modern-day Turkey. And that area was already a cradle of Greek philosophy.
The Ionians. And we hear he came from, a wealthy aristocratic family.
Yes, privileged background.
But the story goes he chose a completely different path. He seems to have rejected all that worldly status and wealth.
Which makes you wonder, what kind of person, back then especially, just walks away from money and power to chase pure knowledge? It's a fantastic question. And it really became part of his philosophical persona, almost an archetype. The accounts say he explicitly surrendered his property, his political prospects. It wasn't just neglect. It was a conscious decision. He felt worldly things would, get in the way of his search for understanding.
Wow.
There's this great anecdote, probably embellished but telling, from Valerius Maximus. Apparently, Anaxagoras came back from a long trip, found his estate totally ruined, and just said, if this had not perished, I would have.
Meaning he would have been ruined by worrying about it.
Exactly. Yep. Or consumed by managing it. Whether it's literally true or not, it paints this picture of someone completely dedicated to the theoretic life, as they called it, detached from worldly concerns, just obsessed with understanding the cosmos. For him, wisdom was the real wealth.
So he has this intense intellectual drive, and then he makes this huge move to Athens around 480 BCE, just as the city is really taking off after the Persian Wars. Why was that move so important? It wasn't just about changing his address, right?
No, not at all. His arrival in Athens, probably in his 20s, and then staying for about 30 years. That marks a real turning point in Western intellectual history. You see, before Anaxagoras, the big philosophical action was mostly in Ionia, where he was from, and also down in southern Italy, with the Eleatics like Parmenides.
Okay.
By settling in Athens, Anaxagoras basically established it as the new center of gravity for philosophy. It was a massive intellectual transfer. He brought that rigorous, questioning Ionian approach right into the heart of Athenian democracy, art, and religion.
So he kind of laid the groundwork for the others.
Absolutely. He paved the way for Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. And his ideas weren't hidden away. His book, his treatise on natural philosophy. Apparently, you could buy it in the marketplace for just 1 drachma.
Really? That cheap?
Relatively speaking, yeah. It made his ideas accessible, which was pretty unusual. These often radical thoughts could circulate among anyone who could read.
And it wasn't just that he moved to Athens. The story goes he got in tight with the most powerful man there.
Pericles. Yes, that connection is absolutely crucial to understanding Anaxagoras' life and, frankly, his eventual downfall. Pericles, the great statesman of Athens' golden age, was known for being rational, a patron of arts and sciences.
A good match for a philosopher, then.
They seem to have found a real connection. Pericles saw him as an intellectual mentor. And Anaxagoras' influence spread through Pericles' circle. Even the famous playwright Euripides is said to have caught his enthusiasm for science and a more, let's say, humanistic view from him.
But being friends with the top dog, that can be risky.
A definite double-edged sword. It gave Anaxagoras this amazing platform, access to the elite. But it also made him a very visible target. His fate got tangled up with Pericles' political fortunes. In the rough and tumble of Athenian politics, being close to power could paint a target on your back.
Which brings us to the really dramatic part. This champion of science, friend of Pericles, ends up on trial for impiety, aspia. What exactly did they accuse him of, and why was that such a massive charge?
It was incredibly serious. Aspia, impiety, or sacrilege wasn't just about offending the gods. It was seen as undermining the very foundations of the state, the civic order. The specific charges came straight from his scientific teachings.
The sun and moon stuff.
Precisely. He was accused of teaching that the sun wasn't the god Helios, but just a red-hot stone or a mass of blazing metal, and that the moon wasn't divine either, just an earthy body that reflected the sun's light.
Which, to us, sounds like science. But back then.
Back then, to the average Athenian steeped in tradition, this was blasphemy. It wasn't just an interesting theory. It was denying the gods, replacing divine agency with, cold, hard matter. It was a fundamental clash. Ionian physis versus Athenian civic religion, an attack on their whole worldview.
Okay, so it sounds like a genuine clash of worldviews, science versus religion, but you hinted it wasn't quite that simple. There was politics involved too.
Oh, absolutely. You've got it. While the religious offense was real for many Athenians, the trial itself seems to have been deeply political. Several ancient sources suggest the prosecution was actually pushed by Pericles' political opponents.
Ah, classic political move. Attack the friend to hurt the leader.
Exactly. Anaxagoras was the vulnerable point. By hitting him with a charge like impiety, which would definitely resonate with the more conservative citizens, they could damage Pericles by association, paint his whole intellectual circle as dangerous, maybe even atheistic.
So the aspia charge was basically a weapon in a political fight.
Pretty much. A proxy war using religious conservatism.
It's a really early and unfortunately timeless example of that dangerous friction between free philosophical thought and political power. We see it again later, tragically, with Socrates.
So with all this going on, the religious anger, the political maneuvering, what actually happened to Anaxagoras, how did the trial end? Well, the outcome was complicated. It showed Pericles' power, but also the limits of that power. Pericles himself apparently spoke in Anaxagoras' defense quite forcefully. The accounts vary a bit, but the consensus is clear. Pericles saved him from the death penalty.
Death penalty? Wow, that was on the table.
For impiety, yes, absolutely. So Pericles managed to prevent that worst-case scenario, but he couldn't get a full acquittal. Anaxagoras was forced to leave Athens, essentially exile.
Where did he go?
He retired to Lampsacus, a Greek colony over on the Hellespont. And here's the fascinating twist. In Lampsacus, he was treated like a hero. He was welcomed, honored, even founded a school there, and kept teaching until he died around 428 BCE.
So Athens kicks him out, Lampsacus celebrates him.
Exactly. The citizens of Lampsacus apparently respected him so much they made the anniversary of his death an annual holiday for schoolchildren. It's a really striking contrast to how he was treated in Athens, the very city he helped make a philosophical powerhouse.
Okay, so to really get what Anaxagoras was trying to do, we need to talk about this huge figure looming over everything, Parmenides. He basically threw down this massive logical gauntlet, right? This Eleatic impasse.
Absolutely. You can't understand Anaxagoras or Empedocles or the atomists, really, without understanding the problem Parmenides created. In his poem On Nature, Parmenides used this incredibly rigorous logic to argue that change and plurality, the everyday world we experience, are fundamentally impossible.
Impossible? How?
His whole argument hinged on this absolute split between what is and what is not. What is not, he argued, absolutely is not. You can't even think it or speak of it.
Okay. Seems straightforward enough.
But the implications were radical. If what is not is impossible, then coming to be something starting to exist is impossible. Because where would it come from? It can't come from what is not.
Right, because what is not doesn't exist.
Exactly. And likewise, passing away, something ceasing to exist, is also impossible, because it can't just vanish into what is not. So Parmenides concluded, real creation and destruction just don't happen.
Okay, so nothing truly begins or ends. But what about different things? Like you and me, this table. How does he explain multiple things existing if change is impossible?
That's the next step in his logic. For there to be multiple things, there would have to be something separating them.
Right.
Some gap.
Empty space. A void.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But what is a void? It's what is not. And since what is not cannot exist,
Then a void is impossible. So there can't be separate things.
according to Parmenides, yes. If there's no void, everything must be one single continuous thing. His conclusion was staggering. Reality, what is, must be one eternal, unchanging, indivisible whole. He even called it a perfect sphere.
Whoa. So the world we see with all its variety and change?
Just an illusion. A way of seeming, he called it. Our senses deceive us. Only pure reason reveals the truth. The unchanging one. This was the Eleatic impasse. How could anyone possibly explain the world of experience after that?
Right. If Parmenides is logically right, how do you save the phenomena? How do you account for the world we actually live in where things clearly do seem to change and there are lots of different things?
Oh, that was the challenge for the next generation, the pluralists. And Anaxagoras' solution was incredibly clever and also, in a way, quite conservative. He didn't try to argue against Parmenides' core logic about what is not. Instead, he accepted the ban on real creation and destruction.
He accepted it. How did that help?
He accepted it by completely redefining what change means. He says this explicitly in fragment B17. Let me quote it roughly. The Greeks don't get it right about coming to be and passing away. Nothing really comes to be or passes away. Things just get mixed together and separated out from things that already exist. So they should call coming to be mixing and passing away separating.
So change isn't things popping into existence or disappearing?
Exactly. It's just rearrangement. It's like cosmic Legos, as you said before. All the fundamental bits already exist eternally. Change is just those bits being combined in new ways or taken apart.
That is clever. It respects Parmenides' logic, but lets the world change.
Precisely. He maintains the permanence of being. Nothing is ever truly created or destroyed, but allows for all the dynamic mixing and separating that we see. It's a way to bridge that gap between pure reason, Parmenides, and our sensory experience of a changing world.
Now, Anaxagoras wasn't alone in tackling this Parmenidean problem. You mentioned Empedocles and the atomists. How did his approach compare to theirs? What made Anaxagoras unique?
That comparison is really illuminating. They all wanted to explain change mechanistically without violating Parmenides' core rule, but they came up with very different building blocks and driving forces. So Empedocles, for instance, he proposed just 4 fundamental roots: earth, air, fire, and water. Qualitatively different, limited number.
The classic 4 elements.
Right. And his driving forces were these 2 external, almost mythical powers: love, pulling things together, and strife, pushing them apart. He denied a void, like Anaxagoras, but imagined tiny pores in things to allow mixing.
Okay. And Anaxagoras?
Anaxagoras went way beyond 4. He said there's an infinite number of fundamental ingredients, these seeds or spermata. And crucially, every kind of substance is fundamental in some way, and it's all infinitely divisible. His driving force was totally different too. A single intelligent principle, nous, or mind, that starts a cosmic spin. And like Empedocles, no void, a full universe, a plenum.
Infinite ingredients, infinitely divisible.
It's complex. And the atomists, Leucippus and Democritus.
They also proposed an infinite number of basic bits atoms, but here's a key difference. Their atoms were all made of the same basic stuff, qualitatively identical. They only differed in shape, size, and how they were arranged.
So not different kinds of stuff, just different shapes. Exactly. And their motion wasn't driven by love or strife or mind. It was just inherent, eternal, random jostling and collisions. And importantly, unlike the other two, the atomists absolutely affirmed the existence of the void. They argued it was necessary for the atoms to move around. The void was the what is not separating the atoms, what is.
Okay, so comparing them. Anaxagoras stands out with the infinite kinds of ingredients, unlike Empedocles 4 or the atomists 1 type, and the infinite divisibility is unique too. But the really big one seems to be Nous, right? The mind.
That's the kicker. That's what truly sets him apart. His infinite qualitatively diverse seeds are one thing. Denying the void is another. But introducing an intelligent directive cause Nous, is the game changer. It's not Empedocles' blind forces cycling back and forth. It's not the atomist purely random, purposeless collisions. Anaxagoras introduces intelligence, maybe even purpose, as a fundamental cosmic principle. And that idea had enormous consequences.
Right. Let's get into those ingredients then. Anaxagoras starts not with separate things, but this total cosmic soup, the migma. What was that like initially?
Yeah, his starting point is pretty mind-bending. He describes this primordial state in fragment B1. All things were together, infinite, both in number and in smallness. For the small too was infinite. Imagine, everything just jumbled together, completely chaotic, infinitely complex, and totally full, no empty space at all, a boundless plenum.
Infinite in number and smallness.
Yes. He says, when all things were together, none of them could be distinguished for their smallness. It was such a thorough blend that nothing stood out. Fragment B4 gives more detail. It was a mixture of all things, of the moist and the dry, and the warm and the cold, and the light and the dark, and of much earth that was in it, and of a multitude of innumerable seeds in no way like each other.
So literally everything, every quality, every type of seed, all meshed together.
Exactly. A state of total indistinction. Like, imagine the ultimate smoothie containing every ingredient in the universe. Blended so fine you can't see any individual part. That was the beginning.
Okay, that leads to his really famous and frankly weird idea. Everything in everything. He says there are no pure substances except Nous. So this gold ring I'm wearing, it's not pure gold. It has bits of everything else in it, even like hair.
According to Anaxagoras, yes.
Yeah.
That's the core of his physics, this principle of everything in everything, sometimes called the moira or portion concept. Apart from Nous, nothing is pure. Any object you perceive, like your gold ring, is actually a composite mixture. It appears as gold because the seeds or portions of gold are predominant in that specific mix. Their dominance makes the gold-like qualities show up to your senses.
So identity is just about what's dominant. It's quantitative, not absolute.
Precisely. It's relational. And yes, technically, that gold ring contains latent seeds of hair, wood, water, air, everything else, just in incredibly tiny, unperceivable amounts. The same goes for the air you breathe. It's mostly air seeds, but with tiny portions of everything else mixed in.
That is truly radical. Where did he get such a counterintuitive idea? Was it just abstract logic, or did he see something in the world that suggested it?
Surprisingly, he seems to have grounded it in observation, particularly the process of nutrition. He asks this rhetorical question in fragment B10, something like, how can hair come from what is not hair, or flesh from what is not flesh?
Implying it can't.
Right. His implied answer is, it can't. Therefore, the food we eat, bread, water, whatever, must already contain tiny hidden portions or seeds of hair, flesh, bone, and everything else our body builds from that food. Digestion isn't creating new stuff, it's just sorting out and assembling the seeds that were already there in the food mixture.
So eating is just separating.
Separating and recombining, yeah. It's a profound vision of physical holism. Everything is interconnected, interpenetrating. The boundaries we see are just phenomenal based on what's dominant. Ontologically, it's all one vast, complex mixture. Very different from Empedocles' distinct roots or the atomist's separate atoms.
Okay, if everything is in everything, what about the smallest possible bit of matter? The atomists had their indivisible atoms. Did Anaxagoras have a smallest unit?
No, and that's another radical departure. He proposed the exact opposite, infinite divisibility. This directly contradicts atomism. Fragment B3 states it clearly. Nor is there a least of what is small, but there is always a smaller. For it cannot be that what is should cease to be by being cut.
Always a smaller, so you can just keep dividing forever.
Infinitely. For Anaxagoras, matter is a true continuum, not made of tiny particles. And here's the crucial link back to the mixture principle. Any part you divide off, no matter how minuscule, still contains portions of everything else.
Wow. So even the tiniest speck imaginable still has a bit of gold seed, hair seed, everything seed in it.
That's the idea. It has to be this way for his system to work. Think about it. If there was the smallest possible particle, say a least bit of pure gold, then it wouldn't contain everything else.
Which would violate everything and everything.
Exactly. And if pure particles existed, complete separation would be possible. Since he denies the smallest part, he ensures complete separation is impossible. As he says in fragment B6, since it is impossible for there to be a least thing, they cannot be separated nor come to be by themselves, but they must be now, just as they were in the beginning, altogether. It's his way of having a diverse, changing world while sticking to Parmenides' rule about being.
So these basic ingredients are called seeds, spermata. But even scholars today argue about what these seeds actually are, don't they? This term, homoemeria, that Aristotle uses complicates things.
Yes, that's a major ongoing debate. Anaxagoras used seeds, spermata. But later, Aristotle described his principles using the term homoemeria, which means things having like parts or homoiomorous substances. Think of flesh. Any part of flesh is still flesh. Contrast that with a face. An eye isn't a face.
Okay, so like-parted things.
Right, so the big question is, did Anaxagoras think the original mixture contained seeds of all the perceptible homoiomorous stuff we see now? Like tiny bits of actual flesh seed, bone seed, gold seed, as Aristotle's term seems to imply.
Or was it something more basic?
Or were the fundamental seeds actually the more basic qualities, or opposites, the hot, the cold, the wet, the dry, the bright, the dark, and all the complex things like flesh and gold are just combinations of these basic quality seeds?
That makes a big difference to how you picture his universe.
It absolutely does. Are the building blocks tiny bits of stuff or tiny bits of qualities? The fragments themselves are ambiguous. Some emphasize opposites, others complex substances. Modern scholars like Patricia Curd argue for interpretations that try to bridge this, suggesting maybe basic properties existed in different forms. But yeah, figuring out the nature of the spermata is central to really understanding Anaxagorean physics.
Okay, let's get to Gnosis, this cosmic mind. You said it was his most revolutionary idea. What makes it so special? Why is it completely different from all those infinite seeds mixed together?
Nous is definitely the centerpiece, the most distinctive part of his philosophy. And fragment B12, the longest one we have, goes into detail about its unique attributes. It sets Nous radically apart from the material mixture it governs. First, and maybe most importantly, Nous is unmixed and pure. B12 says all other things partake in a portion of everything, while Nous is infinite and self-ruled and is mixed with nothing, but is alone, itself by itself.
Alone itself by itself, so it doesn't have portions of everything else in it.
Exactly. It's the sole exception to the everything in everything rule, and Anaxagoras explains why this is crucial. If Nous were mixed with other things, he says the things mixed together with it would thwart it, basically hinder it, so that it would control none of the things the way it does. Its purity is the source of its power and freedom to act.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
To be in charge, it has to be separate. What else?
It's also infinite and self-ruling autocrates. This means it's boundless, unlimited, and completely autonomous. It doesn't depend on anything else for its existence or its action. It's its own boss, so to speak.
Okay, unmixed, infinite, self-ruling.
And omniscient, all-knowing. Nous maintains complete understanding over everything and wields the greatest power. It knows all the things that are mingled together and separated off and distinguished. This is key. Its action isn't random or blind. It orders things based on complete knowledge of the whole cosmic process, past, present, future. It knows what it's doing.
Intelligent design, almost?
Well, intelligent action, certainly. And finally, it's the source of power and motion. B12 says Nous has power over all things that have life. But crucially for cosmology, it had power over the whole revolution so that it began to revolve at the start. It's the ultimate efficient cause, the thing that kicks the whole process off.
So these attributes, unmixed, infinite, self-ruling, omniscient, powerful car, they paint a picture of something totally different from matter.
Absolutely. It's a radical departure. He's essentially starting to carve out a conceptual space for mind as distinct from matter, even if the language is still grappling with that distinction. That separation is the groundbreaking insight here.
So this powerful, intelligent Nous, does it create the universe out of nothing, like a creator god?
That's a really important clarification. No, Anaxagoras' Nous is not a creator god in the ex nihilo sense, creating out of nothing. The basic ingredients, the infinite seeds in the mixture, are eternal. They've always existed alongside Nous.
So Nous didn't make the ingredients?
No, its function isn't creation, it's organization. It takes the pre-existing chaos, that primordial migma, and imposes order onto it.
How does it do that?
It does it by initiating one specific action. It starts a rotation, a whirling vortex motion. The Greek term is perichoresis at one point, within that infinite static mixture.
Just start to spin?
Just start to spin. Once Nous kicks it off, the rotation expands outwards and then seems to continue largely on its own mechanical principles. This vortex acts like that cosmic centrifuge we mentioned. It forces the ingredients to separate out based on their properties, dense from rare, warm from cold, bright from dark, moist from dry.
And that separation creates the world we see?
Yes. That ongoing process of separation and remixing, driven by the vortex, forms the structured cosmos Earth at the center, ether outwards, and so on. So Nous is the initial starter, the prime mover. It provides the intelligent impulse, but then the cosmogony unfolds in a somewhat deterministic mechanical way afterwards. It's the mind that sets the machine running.
Okay, this Nous sounds almost divine with all its power and knowledge. But then in fragment B12, it's also called the thinnest of all things. Thinnest. That sounds physical. Is it truly a non-material mind, or is it just super refined matter? This seems like a huge ambiguity.
You've absolutely nailed one of the biggest, most persistent debates in Anaxagoras scholarship. What is Nous, ontologically speaking? Is it genuinely incorporeal mind, like Plato might later conceive? Or is it just an incredibly subtle, rarefied physical substance, still within the Ionian materialist framework? The textual evidence, especially in B12, tantalizingly points both ways. Well, on the material side, describing it as the thinnest lepton of all things and the purest uses physical language. Lepton suggests it's matter, just extremely fine, maybe like a super ether. That fits the Ionian tradition of finding a material cause for everything.
But the other attributes.
Exactly. The other attributes being totally unmixed, alone by itself, having complete knowledge, autonomous power, these sound utterly unlike any other physical thing in his system. It acts on matter without being affected by it in the same way. It stands outside the everything in everything rule. That strongly suggests a different order of being, something transcendent, non-material.
So it's possible Anaxagoras himself wasn't entirely clear, or maybe didn't have the philosophical language yet to make that sharp distinction?
I think that's exactly right. This ambiguity isn't necessarily a flaw. It's historically incredibly significant. Anaxagoras was grappling with a profound problem. He needed a cause with the functions of an immaterial mind, knowing, ordering, willing, initiating motion without being moved in the same way. But the philosophical toolkit of his time, still largely focused on finding a material archetype, first principle, didn't have a ready-made category for the purely incorporeal.
So Nous is like a placeholder for that idea.
You could call it a proto-incorporeal concept. It's a brilliant, maybe transitional attempt to describe the role of a transcendent, intelligent cause using the immanent physicalist language available. And that very ambiguity, that tension, made Nous an incredibly fertile idea. It laid the crucial groundwork for Plato and Aristotle, who would develop the concepts and vocabulary to tackle the mind-body distinction head-on. Anaxagoras pointed the way, even if he couldn't fully map it out.
Okay, so Nous kicks off this cosmic vortex, this giant centrifuge. What actually happens then? How does the world as we know it, Earth, sun, stars, emerge from that spinning chaos?
Once Nous gets the perichoresis going, it becomes this big mechanistic sorting process. Fragment B12 describes it. The revolution itself caused the separating off. The dense is separated off from the rare, the warm from the cold, the bright from the dark, and the dry from the moist. It's a systematic segregation based on the inherent properties of those infinite seeds.
So things naturally find their place.
Pretty much. As the vortex expands, the heavy stuff, the dense, moist, cold, dark ingredients gets drawn towards the center. That clumps together to form the earth. Meanwhile, the light stuff, the rare, warm, bright elements gets flung outwards to the periphery, forming the surrounding fiery ether.
What about water and rocks?
Water forms from mists that separate out. Earth solidifies from the water. And even stones get a natural explanation. They're bits of earth compacted by cold, then ripped loose and flung outwards by the force of the rotation. So the structured cosmos we see is the direct mechanical result of Nous' initial push, setting off this sorting mechanism.
That brings us to his astronomy, which got him into so much trouble. What were his big ideas about the heavens that were so revolutionary, even blasphemous?
Yeah, his astronomy was groundbreaking and, for the time, incredibly bold. It was a complete attempt to swap myth for natural explanation, and it's what landed him in court. First, the sun and stars. He just flat out declared the sun wasn't the god Helios. It was a mass of red-hot metal or fiery stone. And he even said it was bigger than the entire Peloponnesian Peninsula.
Bigger than the Peloponnese. That's huge. And incredibly audacious to say about a god.
Absolutely. And he said the stars were similar fiery stones, maybe ripped from Earth and ignited by the friction of the spinning ether. He even hinted our sun might just be one star among many. Very modern thinking.
And the moon.
Same naturalistic approach.
Right.
He correctly figured out the moon is an earthy body, like the Earth, with mountains and plains, not a goddess. But the really big lunar insight, a major triumph of early science, was realizing the moon doesn't make its own light.
It reflects the sun's light.
Exactly. Fragment B18 puts it simply. It is the sun that puts brightness into the moon. This was fundamental. It directly contradicted myths, obviously, but it also paved the way for understanding eclipses.
Right. He figured out eclipses too, didn't he? That must have been mind-blowing back then, demystifying something so terrifying.
Monumental is the word. Because he understood the moon reflects sunlight, he could give the first correct scientific explanation for both solar and lunar eclipses. A solar eclipse happens when the moon, during its new phase, passes between the sun and Earth, blocking the sun's light.
Moon's shadow hits Earth.
Right. And a lunar eclipse happens when the Earth passes between the sun and the full moon, casting Earth's shadow onto the moon. This wasn't just a lucky guess. It was deductive reasoning based on his model. It took eclipses out of the realm of divine anger and omens and put them into the realm of predictable natural geometry, a huge step for rationalism.
Did he apply this rational approach to things happening on Earth too, like weather or geology?
He did. His curiosity seems to have covered everything. He explained meteors, for instance, not as messages from the gods, but as stones remember the stones flung out by the vortex, heated to incandescence by friction as they fall through the ether. He's even famously said to have predicted a meteorite fall at Aegospotomy around 467 BCE.
Predicting it would certainly boost his theory.
You'd imagine so. He also had ideas about the Earth itself. He thought it was flat, like a disk floating on a cushion of thick air, and earthquakes. He theorized they were caused by this air getting trapped underneath the Earth and becoming unstable, shaking the ground. Even rainbows got a natural explanation. Just sunlight reflecting off clouds, not some divine sign, always looking for the natural cause.
And he even tackled biology, the origin of life. How did that fit into everything and everything?
Consistently enough, yes. He proposed an early version of panspermia. The idea is that the seeds, spermata of life, aren't unique to Earth. They're everywhere, distributed throughout the cosmos.
Seeds of life, everywhere.
Yes. And they could be carried between worlds, maybe by meteorites. It follows logically from his core principle. If everything contains portions of everything else, and life exists here, then the fundamental seeds of life must also be part of that universal mixture, present everywhere, just waiting for the right conditions to develop. It shows how comprehensive and internally consistent his whole system aimed to be.
Okay, this is so crucial, his legacy. His ideas clearly shook things up, and we know they massively influenced the Athenian giants who came next. Let's start with Socrates, through Plato's account in the Phaedo. How did Socrates first react to hearing about Anaxagoras' Nous?
Right, this section of the Phaedo is fascinating. It's like Socrates' intellectual coming-of-age story. He describes being young and getting really excited when he heard someone reading from Anaxagoras' book. The key phrase that grabbed him was that Nous mind is the disposer and cause of all.
That sounds promising, like he'd found the answer.
Exactly. Socrates thought, finally, here's a philosopher who will explain things teleologically, meaning explain why things are the way they are, because it's the best way for them to be. He wasn't just after mechanical causes. He wanted purpose. He rushed out, got the book, hoping Anaxagoras would explain why it's best for the Earth to be flat, or round, whatever Anaxagoras thought, why the planets move as they do, all based on the intelligent plan of Nous, the promise of a rational, purposeful, good universe.
So he went in with really high hopes for this purposeful explanation driven by mind, but then massive disappointment, right?
Yeah.
What went wrong? Why did Socrates end up so let down?
Profoundly disappointed.
Yeah.
As Socrates read Anaxagoras' book, he found that after that initial exciting claim about Nous being the intelligent cause, Anaxagoras barely mentioned it again. Instead of explaining why things were arranged for the best, Anaxagoras mostly fell back on the same old material and mechanical causes.
Like what?
Socrates complains he explained things using air and ether and water and many other strange things. Basically, Nous was brought in just to kickstart the cosmic vortex, to get the machine running. But once it was running, Anaxagoras seemed to explain everything else mechanistically, without any reference back to Nous' intelligence or purpose or what was best.
So Nous just wound up the clockwork and then left the scene.
That was Socrates' frustration, yes. A powerful start, but an unfulfilled promise. Socrates uses this brilliant analogy, speaking from his prison cell before his execution. He says Anaxagoras would explain why Socrates is sitting there by talking about his bones, muscles, sinews, how they're physically arranged to allow sitting.
The physical mechanics.
Right. But Socrates says that's confusing the necessary conditions for sitting with the true cause. The real reason he's sitting there, he argues, isn't his muscles. It's his judgment that it's better and more just to stay and accept the court sentence rather than escape.
The purpose, the reason why.
Exactly. Anaxagoras provided the how, the efficient causes, but completely missed the why, the explanation in terms of the good, the final cause, the purpose. And this critique is pivotal. Anaxagoras, by setting up Nous but failing, in Socrates' view, to use it teleologically, inadvertently highlighted this huge distinction between efficient cause, what makes something happen, and final cause, the purpose for which it happens. Filling that perceived gap became a central mission for both Plato and Aristotle.
Okay, so Socrates is disappointed. What about Aristotle? He loved systematizing things. How did he assess Anaxagoras? Was it the same critique?
Aristotle's view, laid out in his Metaphysics, where he surveys earlier thinkers, is nuanced, but ultimately lands in a similar place. He actually has high praise for Anaxagoras initially. Compared to earlier materialists who just talked about matter randomly bumping around, Aristotle says Anaxagoras, by bringing in Nous, was like a sober man amongst drunkards.
High praise indeed.
It acknowledges Anaxagoras as the first to really posit an efficient cause that was distinct from matter itself, a principle of order and motion. A huge step forward.
But there's always a but with Aristotle and his predecessors.
But yes, Aristotle then echoes Plato's main criticism. He accuses Anaxagoras of using Nous as a deus ex machina, literally. A god from the machine. That's a term from Greek drama where they'd lower a god onto the stage with a crane to magically solve the plot problems.
So bringing Nous in only when convenient.
That's Aristotle's claim. He says Anaxagoras only drags reason in when he's stuck for a normal mechanical explanation. Otherwise, he ascribes events to anything rather than to reason. Now, some modern scholars think Aristotle might have seen a bit more teleology in Anaxagoras than Plato did, but the main criticism holds. Nous wasn't used consistently or fully as the explanation for cosmic order. It was a tool used sparingly, not the pervasive principle Socrates had hoped for.
So despite these heavy criticisms from the two biggest names that followed him, the idea of Nous wasn't just thrown out. It sounds like they took it and ran with it, transforming it. How did Plato and Aristotle build on this incomplete Nous?
That's the fascinating legacy. The criticisms themselves show how important Nous was.
Yeah.
They didn't discard it. They refined it, transformed it, made it the core of their own, much more elaborate metaphysical systems. Look at Plato's demiurge in the Timaeus. The demiurge is basically Plato's answer to the perceived failings of Anaxagoras' Nous. Like Nous, the demiurge doesn't create matter from nothing. It imposes order on pre-existing chaos. But unlike Nous, as Plato and Socrates saw it, the demiurge acts with constant, clear, good-oriented purpose. It looks to the eternal forms as a perfect blueprint and crafts the physical world to be the best possible moving image of that eternal reality. Plato fully embraced the teleology Socrates missed in Anaxagoras.
So the demiurge is Nous, but with a mission statement.
It's a very good way to put it. And then you have Aristotle's unmoved mover. This is even more abstract. It's pure intellect, thinking of thinking, the ultimate source of all motion. But here's another twist. It's not an efficient cause like Anaxagoras' Nous, which literally started the vortex. The unmoved mover is a final cause.
How does that work? It causes motion by just existing perfectly.
Sort of. It causes motion by being the ultimate object of aspiration or desire for the cosmos. The celestial spheres, for instance, move in their perfect circles because they are trying to emulate the perfection of the unmoved mover. It draws things towards it by being the ultimate good, not by pushing them.
So Anaxagoras' failure to fully explain the why actually became the central problem that Plato and Aristotle spent their careers solving. He set the agenda.
Absolutely. That's why it's called an instructive failure. By putting mind Nous at the center of cosmology, even if imperfectly, he forced the issue. He defined the core question for Athenian metaphysics. What is the role of intelligence and purpose in explaining reality? Plato and Aristotle's monumental systems are, in large part, their answers to the questions Anaxagoras first posed. He opened the door to thinking about a rationally ordered, perhaps even purposeful universe in a way that shaped Western thought for literally millennia.
It's just amazing we can talk about someone from 2,500 years ago in this much detail. But how do we actually know all this stuff? You mentioned his book is lost?
That's right. His one book, On Nature, like so many precious ancient texts, didn't survive. All our knowledge comes indirectly through what we call fragments. These are bits and pieces, sometimes direct quotes, sometimes summaries or paraphrases that were preserved in the writings of later ancient authors.
Like Plato and Aristotle.
Them, yes, who were relatively close in time, but also commentators writing centuries, even nearly a millennium later. The standard way scholars refer to these is using the Diels-Krantz numbering system, DK for short. Anaxagoras is chapter 59 in that system. The A fragments are testimonia, reports about him and his ideas. The B fragments are supposedly his actual words, the verbatim quotes.
So when you quoted fragment B12 about Nous, that's meant to be Anaxagoras' own writing.
That's the claim, yes. though transmitted through others, of course.
And you mentioned that most of these crucial B fragments, especially the big one on Nous, come down to us through just one later writer, Simplicius, who lived way later in the 6th century CE. That sounds potentially problematic. How reliable is that single channel?
It is a huge factor and a source of profound historical irony. Simplicius of Cilicia, a Neoplatonist philosopher, writing almost 1,000 years after Anaxagoras, is our main source for the most important B fragments. Think about that. The ideas of a man basically exiled for being too materialistic and scientific were preserved mostly by someone from one of the most mystical, idealist schools of thought.
So Simplicius wasn't just neutrally copying texts.
Almost certainly not. He wasn't an archivist. He was a philosopher with his own Neoplatonic agenda. He quoted Anaxagoras extensively because he saw Nous as a kind of early, stumbling anticipation of the Neoplatonic divine intellect. He was interpreting Anaxagoras through his own lens.
Which means he might have selected fragments that fit his view, or maybe emphasized certain aspects.
Exactly. There's an unavoidable selection bias. The fragments we have might overrepresent the parts about Nous that resonated with Simplicius and underrepresent, say, the nitty-gritty details of Anaxagoras' natural science, which might have been less interesting to a Neoplatonist. So modern scholars have to constantly practice this critical reading, trying to read through Simplicius to separate Anaxagoras' likely original intent from the Neoplatonic filter. Our knowledge is fundamentally mediated.
Okay, so given these challenges, the lost book, the fragments, the Simplicius filter, what are the big questions modern scholars are still wrestling with when they study Anaxagoras? What keeps the debates going?
Well, despite those hurdles, Anaxagoras scholarship is actually really active. The debates tend to circle around the ambiguities and seeming tensions in the fragments. One major one we've touched on is the nature of the ingredients, those spermata. Are they tiny bits of perceptible stuff like flesh and bone, as Aristotle's homoeomeria implies? Or are they more like fundamental qualities, hot, cold, wet, dry? Scholars like Patricia Curd, David Sider, others have complex arguments, and the answer really changes how you understand his whole physics.
Right, the stuff versus qualities debate. What else?
Another big one is the coherence of everything in everything. How does that principle actually work, logically and physically, especially combined with infinite divisibility? If everything contains everything else, how do things maintain distinct identities? Does it lead to paradoxes? Scholars analyze how Anaxagoras might have defended it and what its deep implications are for physics and perception.
Trying to make sense of that core, counterintuitive idea.
Exactly. And then, probably the most persistent debate, the one that keeps coming back, is the status of Nous, material or incorporeal, transcendent or immanent. Is it a superfine substance or something truly outside of matter? This isn't just about Anaxagoras. It connects to the whole history of how Greek philosophy and Western thought in general developed the concept of mind. These aren't just dusty historical points. They're live philosophical issues that Anaxagoras force us to confront.
Okay, let's try to pull this all together. Anaxagoras clearly emerges as this figure of incredible intellectual courage, breaking so much new ground. What's his ultimate, lasting significance when you look at the big picture of Western thought?
He really is a figure of immense importance, Anaxagoras of Clazomenae. Despite the fragmentary nature of the evidence, he stands as that crucial bridge. He connects the early Ionian natural philosophers with their focus on physis to the rise of systematic metaphysics in Athens with Plato and Aristotle. He took Parmenides' challenge head-on, building this incredibly ingenious, if complex, physical system, infinite divisibility, universal mixture to try and reconcile logic with experience.
So saving the phenomena while respecting Parmenides.
Right. But arguably, his greatest and most enduring legacy is the introduction of Nous, this unique cosmic mind as the source of order and motion. That idea really changed the game.
So he has this kind of dual legacy, right? The pioneering scientist on one side and the catalyst for metaphysics on the other.
That's a perfect way to put it. His significance is definitely twofold. On one hand, he was a pioneering natural scientist. His explanations for the sun, the moon, reflected light, eclipses, they were centuries ahead of their time, setting a new benchmark for rational inquiry, moving decisively away from myth. His trial itself shows how revolutionary and dangerous that scientific worldview was.
And the other side?
The other side is his role as a catalyst for metaphysics. By introducing Nous, even if he intended it mechanistically, he put mind, intelligence, maybe even purpose, right at the heart of cosmological debate. He posed a question about cosmic intelligence that he didn't fully answer, at least not to the satisfaction of his successors. And it was precisely that unanswered question, that perceived gap, that set the agenda for Plato, Aristotle, and much of Western philosophy and theology that followed.
So it wasn't necessarily that he got all the answers right, but that he asked the right questions. He set the stage for these huge debates.
Absolutely. His importance lies as much in the profound questions he forced philosophy to confront as in the answers he gave. Questions about mind and matter, order and chaos, purpose and mechanism. His successors found his system incomplete, sure, but their own incredible achievements were built directly on the foundations he laid. His sober insistence, as Aristotle put it, that mind had to be a fundamental cosmic principle that charted the course for the next 2,000 years of thought. He really did change how we think about the universe and our place in it.
Well, we hope this exploration of Anaxagoras here on AI History of Western Philosophy has given you some food for thought, pointed you towards those original sources, maybe even sparked some new ideas. And maybe, just maybe, when you look up at the moon tonight, you might think about the sheer audacity of that thinker 2,500 years ago who looked up and declared it was just a rock reflecting the sun, and in doing so, forever altered our perception of the cosmos and the potential role of mind within it all.